On today's Rebels Edge, summer travel season officially kicks off. Will the airlines take flight? Buy now, pay later, darling, Affirm up almost 10% today on Goldman Sachs buy rating. Faithful viewers know we've loved this one for a while now. And will Vinny Viola's Panthers pounce Edmonton tonight to grab the NHL crown and put an end to what has been one of the most exciting NHL playoffs in recent history? All that and more on today's Rebels Edge.
And welcome to the Rebels Edge. That cold opening, I got to tell you something. Nobody does it better than Marc LoPresti. The guy just has it down to a. Tell you what, our good friend Vinny Viola. I know who we're pulling for right now, Mark. I mean, this guy's a wonderful guy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But he's done an amazing thing in a short period of time, sitting on the planet Earth. What he's done, what he's accomplished, we'll talk a little bit about that. That it's going to make you want to pull for the Panthers. I'm absolutely certain of that, right, Mark?
That is for damn sure. From his military service to what he's done on Wall Street, a remarkable guy. Have the pleasure of knowing him a little bit. But I think the Panthers, I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a call. Yeah. Safer to make these calls in sports than on stocks. I think the Panthers are going to pounce the Edmonton Oilers tonight. And I think it's, I think you mentioned, Pete, this has been some really serious ratings booster for the NHL.
Yeah, and the greatest player, at least right now, and maybe, some will argue, maybe, of all time, Connor McDavid might have something to say about that Panthers side of things, too. So that's going to be interesting because if anybody can put the puck in the net, it's that guy. He is absolutely as special a player in hockey as Joe Montana was in the NFL. I mean, it's just amazing to watch what this guy's able to accomplish. It's pretty cool. And we got ties to both of these I'll tell you about later. All right, let's just jump right into it, Mark. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. We're going to start with the macro minute. And I think with my macro minute, I would say PCE is certainly something we're all staring at. That number is going to come out Friday. Why is it so important? It's because the Fed basically has told us how important it is, and all the data is important. But this one is one that I think that they look at even with a little bit more just waiting to see what those numbers look like, Mark. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot in terms of the cuts, but if they really come up with some interesting numbers, we may start to talk a little bit more about September being the potential cut. What do you think?
Well, listen, I think everybody's hoping that we have a continuation of last week's cool/inline PCI numbers, but that didn't do much to significantly move the Fed futures in terms of cut anticipation. Mm-hmm. The street is looking for, I think, up 2.6%. year over year, just spot 1% month over month when those numbers get released on Friday. And that is, of course, to your point, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. But, my macro minute, Pete, summer travel today, I'm not sure why it's today, is the official kickoff. 2.9 people went through TSA this past weekend. But look, with Boeing issues, cost overruns, Southwest potential restructuring, it's really hard to call this one in terms of whether or not to go out and start getting bullish on the airlines. I am skeptical.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical on that as well, although we are seeing some option activity today. And if you were members of Market Rebellion, you'd be able to see some of that as well, maybe in jets. Maybe I'll give you a little hint. All right, next up, we got the fantastic futures. The 10-year Treasury is something we talk about all the time. We're always looking at that one, more so, I'd say, Mark, than any of the other, but more so than the 2-year. People talk about 2s and 10s. I think the 10 is what most people are focused on. And I just wanted to point out on May 28th, it was at a 4.64. You know where we are today? Sort of closer to a 4.24, 4.25, somewhere in there. So we are seeing a little bit of progress on that side, coming down just a little bit. Last thing I'll say is the volatility index, the VIX itself, 12. I'll give it an upside now of about 1375. It's still a very, very tight range, but it's expanded a little bit off of being just in the 12s. So we are now 12 to call it 1375 for the VIX.
Yeah, but still somewhat muted, right? Particularly when you see the markets reaching new highs day after day. Obviously, the Nas off a bit. That's 100% or 90% Nvidia. That's not a technical analysis there, but that's just what my gut's telling me. But Pete, when it comes to the bond market, I mean, is it still as reliable a signal as it was years ago? I feel like with this yield curve being inverted for so long, we stopped talking about it. We stopped caring about it almost. It seems like the bond market is not catching up with reality as quickly as it used to. That's just my 2 cents.
No, I think you're probably correct on that one. All right, now let's just jump into these stocks. We've got about 4 really fun stocks that we want to talk about right now. Alnylam, that one's, I think, very, very interesting. They've got some very positive news out there, Mark, and the drug effectiveness of what they've got treating the progression. We've got something that's very deadly, and yet they've got something that looks like it's going to be what's going to be curing people, or at least helping people, I should say it that way. But we look at these different biotechs all the time, all the different things that they do. Look at that stock. If you told me that this thing's up 30%, I'd say, what did they solve something for cancer? And yes, indeed, that is exactly what they're doing.
The science cured cancer.
Regulatory approval and all the rest of it. 52-week highs, up 30%. The stock got all the way up to 221. Last I looked, it was closer to 215, something like that. But in the first 30 minutes of the day, Mark, it traded 5 times the average for a full day in the first 30 minutes. So people are definitely impressed with what they've been able to put out there. You look at the free cash flow, that's really solid. You've got a deep pipeline. It's not just a one drug company. This is a deep pipeline. This is a name I think you want to have on your sheets. And oh, by the way, we did have this one in UOA, unusual option activity, going all the way back into March. We had some unusual options that were being bought way out in September. Well, those options today have moved from what you see right there in front of you, and you see some of these numbers. I'll tell you what, 28 bucks. Well, today they're at 82 bucks. So I'd say that they've done pretty well. And this was a good, we didn't know what the time frame was going to be, but it looks like they hit the time frame pretty nicely to me.
Yeah, and look, a couple things I'll just point out quick on this one. These are cardiomyopathy and amyloidosis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. These are diseases that have a pretty broad impact, so their market is really big. The efficacy rate's significant. That's part of why you saw the stock moving the way it did. And the unusual that we had, that's why, I mean, I know people tend to be a little bit more interested, maybe even obsessed, especially with the ODTEs, the one day to expirations and the shorter timelines. Don't ignore the longer timeline futures and options. And if you want to learn how to play them, you got to tune in and join one of our Market Rebellion courses and or subscription. So that's all I got on this one. But man, what a great call back in March.
Yeah, that and just an incredible run. And actually, quite a few people saying, "Hey, thanks a lot. This has been pretty great." And I'm like, "Hey, that's awesome, fantastic." Affirm, Mark, this one's pretty nice. I mean, we're talking about buy now, pay later. Goldman Sachs says, you know what, we're going to move this thing to a buy. And I know you've been on this one. My one concern, and then I'll let you take over, but my one concern is always my concern when we've got companies out there that are not biotechs, but companies that are out there. When are they ever going to make money? When do they go profitable? That's my one gripe about this company and many of the others where, okay, they come out in 2021, I believe is when they came out as a publicly traded company. They still have yet to be able to crack into that area where they're making money. And that's my only concern. So tell me your side of the story, and maybe I'd be willing to jump on board with you.
Well, listen, I've been a BNPL bull for a while. I've talked about it on Fox. I've talked about it on our shows. I've talked about it on other networks for several months now, right? And it's not rocket science, Pete, with credit card debt getting where it is, consumers looking to stretch their dollar, companies looking to lean into that, right, and offer retailers offering their consumers another way to pay. This is layaway, buy now, pay later. Apple last week ditching their own layaway BNPL application for Affirm exclusively. You and John covered that on the show. The stock sold off on that news. I think that was a buy the rumor, trade the news thing because I didn't fully understand the sell-off. Goldman putting a buy rating and noting, by the way, that their cash flow and their balance sheet is sort of better than the rest. And look, this is a nascent industry. It's an industry that's still at the stage of gaining market share. I think that's why you haven't seen the profitability that you are rightly looking for. But I think this could go even higher as people turn more. They're gonna. The credit card balances are not suddenly going to go down.
No.
They're not. And as you see BNPL applications proliferate from what started with the high dollar big box retail going downstream, don't want to see people buying groceries on this kind of thing, but you're going to see an expansion in the use of BNPL, and Affirm is the pack leader. So that's why I stay bullish on this.
BNPL, buy now, pay later, for those who don't follow along as closely as we do with this type of thing. All right, medical devices, ResMed. This one's pretty interesting, I think, as well, Mark, because everybody, you hear that name, you don't really care. But then all of a sudden I say, well, these guys are part of that world with CPAP. Oh, really? Now everybody's like, well, I'm well aware. I see these commercials. The guys have like this elephant thing coming out of their nose and trying to breathe at night. And it's awful, obviously. Well, one of the things that is hurting them, though, because they are the CPAP king, is Lilly has some reports out there saying, hey, look, it turns out that maybe we're actually kind of helping things out more than you even know about right now. And it's, sleep apnea is starting to become something that's going to be not there anymore with the obesity side. Well, if that's really true, that's a bit of a problem. The stock today definitely reflecting that, Mark. It's getting hammered. It actually started the day at 193. Then it got all the way down to 180. And then it's kind of bounced around a little bit, but nonetheless down, call it 10, 12%. That's a pretty substantial hit. I like what these guys do. I think medical devices is a really interesting area, but if this is actually going to be something that plays out to be true, I think this could be a major problem for this company. That's why I think right now I'd be staying away from this one.
Hey, listen, while I have occasionally played one on TV, Pete, as you may know, I am not a licensed physician. But I can tell you one thing, it ain't rocket science to figure out that if you are obese, if you become less obese and you lose weight, you're going to have an easier time sleeping. I don't need to be a board-certified cardiologist to tell you that. I also don't need to be a board-certified cardiologist to tell you that you probably don't, if you can avoid it, you don't want to go to bed with the equivalent of a MiG fighter pilot's headgear apparatus on. It's not attractive. It's not comfortable. And it's something that a lot of people have to, because sleep apnea is a very, very bad thing, can increase your chances of heart attack significantly. So weight loss, reducing the proliferation of weight loss drugs, reducing the need, the demand for CPAP and sleep apnea type things. Of course, I'd stay away from this one.
Yeah, especially when it's not just Lilly. There's multiple different folks out there, and this is becoming something that's obviously very good for the public, but maybe not so good for ResMed. All right, last one, Nvidia. How could we not talk about Nvidia? It's a day that ends in day. Mark, the stock is absolutely taking a little bit of a turn to the downside. Now, just on Thursday, we hit all-time highs at 140. Now, this is post-split, so just remember that. But we hit these highs at 140 on Thursday and immediately turned and started to drop. Friday, dropped a little bit more. Today, dropped a little bit more. So it kind of makes you wonder, okay, well, what's going on here? And I can tell you this, the one thing that a lot of people sort of left behind because they were so excited about AI and everything is you got to look at what those PEs are, the price versus earnings. And this is a company that actually does have earnings, but and very big earnings. But you know what? It was getting a little bit toppy maybe, after the split. Where's the next news source? What's going to be new in the next couple of weeks? Maybe. I'm just throwing that out there because for whatever reason, Mark, we are seeing some selling and some pressure to the downside. And I can tell you this, in 2019, it was trading at a 21 PE, price to earnings. In 21, it had a 75 PE. In 23, it was 140 PE. So even though we're in the 50s, which is significantly lower, and obviously that's because of the success they've had with AI, that's still a high number, especially when you look around the rest of the market and you see PEs out there in the 20s, 30s, maybe even upper 30s, maybe lower 40s. But this is a name where you look out there and you say, well, it is a little rich. Maybe it's time to take a little something off. I think that's what we're seeing now. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think that's the rationale for why we're seeing some of the sells right now. What do you think on this one?
I mean, look, that PE ratio. I mean, this thing is pricier than a seafood tower at a Miami restaurant. It's definitely expensive. There's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
And I think a little bit of profit taking is not a bad thing. It was looking pretty overbought midweek last week, going into last week. Not shocking, not terrible. My only concern, Pete, is Jim Cramer on Friday said despite the pullback, he still maintains a very bullish outlook on the stock and expects it to outperform Apple and Microsoft. So I don't know. That could be a bearish indicator. I'm joking, of course. We're friends with Jim, but yeah, I wouldn't freak out. I'm still an Nvidia bull for all the reasons we talk about incessantly. Not the least of which, I'll say it real quick: demand for the graphic processing chips. AI right now, 90% of it, certainly what people use, is search based on text. When you start getting into search based on video and AI results that are video generated, you're going to look at a 40x increase in the demand for stuff that companies like Nvidia make, and that's just getting started. So I'm not getting off the bowl on this one.
I hear you. How about the NHL? Let's get into our sports right now. The NHL is pretty interesting because, why is it? Well, the Panthers were up 3-0. It looked like it was all over. It looked like, well, maybe they lose one and then it's done. Then they lose two and maybe it's going to be done. Then they lose three. Now we're at a game 7 mark. I mean, this is really exciting. And the NBA's all done. That one's all been cleaned up. So what's their competition right now? Is it Major League Baseball? We haven't even gotten to the All-Star break yet. So no, people really, people who love baseball, of course, they're watching baseball. But the viewership of the NHL has gone up, 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 up. As a matter of fact, the playoffs up 27%. These finals viewership is up now 36%. And game 6, it was up 54%. So we are seeing a lot of folks that are looking over there. And there's a lot of fun things that you could play with here, Mark, because game 7, you've got U.S. against Canada, right? You've got Florida against Edmonton. Well, you don't hear that very often when you're talking about hockey. No. You've got Bobrovsky on one side. You got Connor McDavid on the other side. You've got the goalie playing against one of the best goalies there is, playing against what I said earlier, which is maybe the best player, not just now, but maybe all time. I mean, he's somewhere close to that Gretzky-like, except for he's bigger and maybe a little bit faster, and he's scoring a hell of a lot of goals. So there's a lot going on. By the way, just in the postseason, 8 goals, 34 assists. Not so bad. I mean, a lot of guys don't do that in the entire season, and I'm just talking about postseason right now. So it's amazing. And our buddy Vinny Viola, who's the primary owner of the Panthers, the reason you got to pull for them right now, first of all, I don't care if you're a Canadian or not. You want to go with this guy because he's an Army Ranger, New York law. He's got Virtu Financial. Oh, and by the way, he owns the team. I mean, this guy is just a special human being. He's done his sacrifice for the United States of America around the world. And he's an amazingly sharp guy who's done incredible on the business side of things. And you know what? It's kind of fun to see Florida playing against a Canadian team right up all the way up to Edmonton. What do you think about this one in game 7? Who's going to take it?
Well, listen, you would think with the viewership numbers that Caitlin Clark could join the NHL the way that they're just going parabolic. It's really a remarkable thing. And I got to our producer, Jared, is that Trotsky up there? And I'm not sure what that graphic is. He might have turned this into a poli-sci thing.
That is Lord Stanley of the Stanley Cup.
Sure, that's yes. Lord Stanley.
And he famously married Mrs. Cup, of course. And so that's how that came to be. But look, to keep it quick, because I know we got to talk about, or I want to talk about some very interesting shenanigans that have gone on in the NBA in the past in the MLB in the past 24 hours. But Vinny knows how to pick winners, Pete. I mean, the guy, he's just got a knack for it, whether it's personnel, whether it's market opportunities, whether it's players, racehorses. The man, you didn't mention, the man's had a tremendous amount of success. He owns a racing team that has had horses in the Preakness, in the Stakes, I think in the Derby. I'm actually pretty sure in the Derby. So he knows how to pick winners. I think Florida has just looked extraordinarily strong during this. I've watched most of the games in the series. As I said at the top of the show, Panthers gonna pounce.
I'm with you. I'm hoping, and I'm hopeful. So maybe that my emotions bringing me over there more so than it should. But you know what, Vinny Viola, what a wonderful guy. I mean, just an absolute first-class guy, and you and I both know that. All right, so we're going to split here. I'm going to talk a little Olympics. You're going to do a little Major League Baseball. But here's what I've got for you. I love the Olympics. Why do I love the Olympics? Because I was a track guy. I ran the 100-meter. I did the 110-meter hurdles. I did the 400 hurdles. I threw the shot. I threw the disc. I threw the javelin. You name it. I love track and field. And the past week or so with the U.S. trials going on, it's been phenomenal. By the way, I don't know how they get faster, but they do, Mark. I don't know in a million years how Noah Lyles can jog the last 10 meters. He's the 100-meter male for us. Ran a 9.80. In the finals, he ran a 9.83. In the semifinals, he ran a 9.80 on the 100-meter. I mean, it's just ridiculous that somebody can do that. On the women's side, just as great. I mean, Sha'Carri Richardson is absolutely a freak show athlete. She's a beautiful young lady. Snoop Dogg loves her to death. He was sitting up there in the stands. He was part of this whole thing. It was so great, Mark. He was coming down onto the track and enjoying the festivities up there in Oregon. It was killer. She ran a 10.86 meters. I know a lot of people don't know the numbers, but that's an extraordinary number. And she jogged the last 5 yards. I mean, it's unbelievable how good these people are. And lastly, I've got the shot putter. And a lot of people, they look past that. But Ryan Krauser, he's won 2 gold medals already. He will win the 3rd gold medal. Mark, the guy literally just stands out there, does his thing, throws it once, and sets a new world record. I mean, it's something like you've never seen. When you can throw a 16-pound ball 77.36 feet, I would say that you are an amazing human being that is doing something that no other human being has ever been able to do. And we have some very bright folks out there. I know we got swimmers and divers and everything else, but I'm telling you, these track and field people are amazing to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I did not know that in your illustrious curriculum vitae in sports that you were a shot putter. That's what it's called? You're a shot putter. Is there another name for it?
No, you put the shot.
You put the shot. Okay. Well, incredible stuff and certainly interesting. But another friend of ours from the financial and sporting world, Stevie Cohen, cannot be too pleased with the breaking news this morning that pitcher Edwin Diaz has been suspended for 10 games for use of a controlled substance. And folks, it's not what you're thinking. It was not testosterone shots or roids or cocaine. It was a little of the old grease, like the hamburger grease. They still don't know what it is. It's out with forensics, I'm sure. But I mean, here's what I got to ask you, Pete. How do these guys think in today's day and age with the cameras and the scrutiny and everything else? How do they think they're going to get away? And it wasn't just rosin, and it wasn't just a little bit of sweat, which, of course, that's what Diaz suggested. But a 10-game suspension is a pretty serious suspension for what is a pretty serious offense in the MLB. How do these guys think they're going to get away with it today's day and age? That's the part I don't get.
How do they think they're going to get away from it with it, and why? Why? I mean, these are Major League Baseball pitchers who have clearly showed that what they can do without that stuff. But to go and then start to use that stuff, maybe you're struggling, maybe whatever, but somebody's going to catch you, Mark. I mean, there's just no way on God's earth you're going to be out there as a pitcher with everybody focused on the one guy holding the ball.
Right.
If you're in left field, that's a different story. So they're like, hey, he's only on camera when the ball gets hit out that direction. But when you're a pitcher, you are under a lot of scrutiny that everybody's looking at absolutely everything. It's amazing to me that somebody would even try that anymore, but it's kind of cool that they at least caught it, because you know what? The one thing I do stand for is play by the damn rules, do the right thing, play by the rules. And if you're not, you're out. And this guy's going to be out. What did you say? 10 games?
10 games. 10 games. And Pete, speaking of the rules, I know I did the open, but I got a couple of shameless plugs that
Yeah.
I got to do, so maybe I'll wrap us up. But speaking of the rules, folks, you got to know them to play the game like a pro, which means you got to become part of the great Rebel Nation. Join us at Mark Rebellion. Go to markrebellion.com/get started. You can sign up for things like the Rebel Roundup, which is our daily newsletter of everything that happened in the markets with analysis, UOA. It's not a cut and paste job. It is our editor, Justin Nugent, does an amazing job. He starts with a blank page. It's remarkable stuff. We've got the Rebel Setup every morning, 8 to 9 a.m., live with Steve Kalasian, the only show of its kind, we believe, that helps you understand how futures markets are positioning your portfolio for the rest of the day. You can still catch last week's unusual options activity live webinar with with John. We've still got that replay available. Lots of folks tuned in. We had 1,200 plus registered for that.
Nice.
Pete, was a really remarkable event. And we're going to be announcing our mastermind as part of 10X WealthCon coming up this October with our business partner and friend, Grant Cardone. Look out for that. As always, trade smart. Have a great week. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.